Thank you, Chair, for those comments. Commander of the Sri Lanka Army, General Jagat Jayasuriya, Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a civilian and I'm honored to be here today. I would like to thank the Sri Lanka security forces for your deep commitment and sacrifice to make Sri Lanka one of the safest countries in the world today. The hard-won peace would not have been possible if not for the vision and leadership extended at every level to defeat terrorism. My civilian colleagues, some of whom are not present here today, and I have worked closely with the Sri Lankan security forces for the past 3 years in the field of rehabilitation and training. I would like to express our gratitude to all the commissioned and non-commissioned security forces personnel who have worked with deep commitment, compassion, and to those who continue to work tirelessly to make the rehabilitation program what it is today. The foresight of the Secretary of Defense in recognizing the value of independent assessment on the effectiveness of the rehabilitation is indeed remarkable. The vision of General Daya Ratnayaka, the first Commissioner General, for setting the standards and having confidence in the need for evaluation, subsequent Commissioner Generals, General Sudanta Ranasinghe, who managed a bulk of the work in rehabilitation, General Chandana Rajaguru, and our current Commissioner General, Brigadier Darshana Hettiarachchi, for their contribution towards this global imperative. I would like to thank General Kamal Gunaratne, the then Vanni Commander, for his unreserved support and guidance, which gave us civilians the confidence to work in an area just recovering from a war. Ladies and gentlemen, why did Sri Lanka need a terrorist rehabilitation program? Because she went through 3 decades of terror. This could easily be forgotten, but this is what life was like in Sri Lanka. Acts of terror became a common occurrence involving car bombs, bus bombs, train bombs, suicide planes, suicide boats, and human-borne IEDs, vehicle-borne IEDs. The terrorists massacred and maimed thousands of civilians, unarmed security forces personnel. The terrorists struck at the heart of the business capital in Colombo, including this very hotel that you're sitting in. Their remit was from the CBD to the border villages. The terrorists destroyed infrastructure, destroyed fuel, power plants, and waterways, and even cut out the water supply. This is still the living nightmare for some of the countries in the world today. The cost of human suffering was immense. It became a part of our lives. Everyone in this country has lost a colleague, a friend, or a family member. The reign of terror brought to an end 3 years ago with the military defeat of terrorism. The political leadership stood firm in its resolve to end the terror that gripped the nation for 30-odd years. In spite of a segment, I must say, a segment of the diaspora influenced by the Tamil Tigers that exerted pressure on the international community. The country has now moved from what you see on the screen to what is up here. So the transition is remarkable. And we must remember that this is where the country was at before terrorism was being defeated. The peace won was at a cost of a large number of lives of security personnel and civilians killed and maimed by terror activities. Now Sri Lanka is in the phase of maintaining its hard-won peace. When the security forces guided the hostages into safety, the Tamil civilians and terrorist cadres started to question the terrorist propaganda about the perceived enemy, the other that they were taught to hate. The foundation for rehabilitation and reconciliation, I believe, was laid through the manner, it's the manner in which the civilians and surrendered cadres were treated. With the surrender and apprehending of terrorists, Sri Lanka launched its rehabilitation program to bring back her citizens to civilian life. The vision of the president was rehabilitation as an alternative to incarceration. And the method, in his words, was treat them as your own children. Ladies and gentlemen, the rehabilitation program, the 6+1, is uniquely Sri Lankan, while some of the components are found common to other global programs. In the implementation of the rehabilitation program, Sri Lanka consulted friendly countries at the initial stages, Singapore with its success in rehabilitation of Jemaah Islamiyah, an Al-Qaeda motivated group. The 6 components seek to reconnect the individual with the very aspects that the Tamil Tigers denied or manipulated in the making of a terrorist. For a moment, imagine what happens when you take away all these components from your life. There's a vacuum created. Mainstream education was replaced with indoctrination and training in terror tactics. Mainstream vocation was replaced with vocations that would help to further the terrorist agenda. Religious practice not advocated, and instead the veneration of the terrorist leader and the mass murder conducted by the suicide cadres, they were venerated. Denied participation in civil society, denied engaging in cultural activity. Contact with family was minimized. These aspects are replaced with the terrorist subculture and the bonds to the group. The freedom to think as an individual was denied, instead indoctrinated with group thinking, nurturing anger, hatred by manipulating thought and perception through narratives. The space to engage in recreational activities were denied and replaced with the constant focus on the duties of the group and its leaders. Within rehabilitation, the beneficiary is supported to reconnect to all these aspects to enable the beneficiary to live as an individual connected to the essential components in civil society. The community awareness programs were to minimize a sense of isolation of the beneficiary from their own Tamil community. The power imbalance was restored with civil society regaining the freedom of movement and coming within the laws of the country as opposed to Tamil Tiger terrorist rule. The community in a sense expects the beneficiary to return to an equal status instead of exercising the previous authority. But how did the Tamil Tiger terrorists, and indeed the terrorists the world over, use actual and perceived grievances to facilitate the radicalization process? Terrorists work on the basis that information need not be true, but needs only to be believed. They secure a support base by justifying the support for terror through disinformation campaigns. Terrorists recruit individuals using emotive strategies when they propagate disinformation for recruitment. They sustain their membership by alienating contact to propagate the disinformation among civil society and continuing to justify and rationalize the support for terror. Using emotive strategies, they maintain motivation. A schema of anger and hatred is nurtured within a single narrative with an enemy to hate and an enemy to target. Let us look at this drama triangle for a moment, how terrorists interact with and play to different audiences. They portray the image of the victim to the international community and to NGOs and INGOs. They secure international support, moral and financial. They portray the image of the aggressor and the persecutor to their enemy and those who dare to oppose them, and it creates fear. To civilians, they portray the image of the rescuer to secure local support for recruitment and to gather intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is essential to identify the components that the terrorist group fulfills to enable the survival of its violent ideology. It gives a sense of meaning, belonging, acceptance, purpose, value, self-confidence, sense of being special, power, dignity, and respect for the family. And the terror as the vehicle to achieve these aspects by destroying the other. When radicalized into violence, the person is transformed from within by an ideology and wishes to live by it, promote it, and die for it. Within rehabilitation, the person is transformed from within and begins to re-engage with family, civil society, thus moving away from violent extremism. These are some pictures of a rehabilitation center taken last year. You can see the relaxed kind of environment within which the rehab takes place. Ladies and gentlemen, rehabilitation is about reaching the hearts and the minds of the beneficiaries. And by engaging the beneficiary in a large number of activities that are transformative. Livelihood, skill building through education and vocational training programs, reconnect to civil society through social, cultural, family rehab, enable the person to reconnect with self through psychological and creative therapies and spiritual rehab, facilitate alternative thinking to transform thinking and counter the mono-ethnic separatist ideology, thereby mentoring and guiding beneficiaries to move away from violent extremism into peace building. This is a picture that I like very much. Here the officer, the captain in charge of this center for 1,900 odd females, she's among the beneficiaries. And if you look closely at this picture, you can see the couple of beneficiaries are holding her hand. And you do not see this unless there is genuine engagement. So if we look at the essential components, I believe the political will is essential. Many countries today struggle with implementing rehab programs due to the lack of political will. The presidential amnesty was timely, and it was compassion that we saw there. The clear message that terrorism is a criminal offense. Recognizing the need to prosecute those engaged in atrocities. There is a lot of compassion towards the rehabilitation of former cadres, but compassion needs to be guided by wisdom. So it is essential that there is a clear thinking about who and how the prosecution would happen. The leadership that provides guidance to staff and to implement that. The leadership is an essential component. And the responsible organization to carry out a large-scale activity involving terrorist cadres, there has to be a responsible organization. And within Sri Lanka, the only organization that could do this is the Sri Lanka's military. So thinking in terms of rehabilitation is essential. The linguistics, Professor Kruglansky already mentioned about the linguistics. The terrorist cadre within rehab is identified as a beneficiary, and a child soldier is a survivor, not a victim. The ethos is one of rehab. The staff reflect the spirit of rehab. The beneficiary begins, through these activities, the beneficiary begins to see the other as non-threatening, observing in the other behavior and values he or she wants to emulate, be a part of, and adopt, thereby invalidating the distorted images that were propagated and maintained in the other by the terrorist organization. The artwork. This beneficiary has definitely figured out the 6+1 because each leaf represents one of the aspects of rehabilitation. This is again another drawing, all four communities helping to rebuild the nation. And this is a picture of protecting the country from external threats and destructive influences. I would like to put up here on the screen a few reflections by a former child soldier who went through rehabilitation. She says, terrorism destroys communities and destroyed our well-being until the end. Losing and separating mother and child, communities bore the tears of the people. They trapped us by giving false hopes, saying even death can become life. The tombstone and epic. And here I believe she's referring to the martyrdom of suicide terrorism. And this is a child, somebody under the age of 18, who has written this, being in rehab, reflecting. Rehabilitation, you give us the opportunity to live with strength and perseverance. I like this one. The officer in charge of rehabilitation who protect us like the eyelids that protect the eyes. And I think this is not a phrase that would be used in common parlance in Sinhalese or maybe not in English, but I believe it is used in Tamil. I conclude my poem, this was a poem that she wrote, by bowing in worship to the gods who brought us to you. And in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, rehabilitation is the interface between incarceration and entry into civil society, where the individual is remorseful and decides to leave violence behind due to the delegitimization of the need for violence. During the period of rehabilitation, the individual has the time and the space to reflect within a safe environment. It is a time when the individual prepares to reconnect with family, friends, community, and society. You have seen plenty of images on this yesterday and today. Rehabilitation is a process. It's a process that provides the best opportunity for the former terrorists to return to civil society and to begin life, to lead life as a citizenship, participating in civilian life. I thank you.